Begin the current Daf, this Eruvin Daf. Begin 11 lines down at the top of the Yomim. We continue this discussion in the previous stuff regarding this halacha, the topic of this parak, regarding ma'abrin shiur, how when we have a circular city, let's say that you square it off, related halachas to squaring off the city. Ashir Kozban Zikazik and Cheska to Daf Chaim. Pisham was joining us for today's Daf. Something that's been discussed in today's Daf is, like we said, squaring off a round city for the purpose of measuring the Tchum Shabbos, where it's round and then we square it off. Additionally, two methods of figuring out where north and south are, because like we're going to see in the Gemara, we square it off according due north and due south. That's how we square it off. How much space do we gain by squaring the city and squaring the Tchum? Because as we're going to discuss in today's Daf, there's two things that we square off. Square off the city and that of the Tchum. A discussion of the empty space that is left around the cities of the Levium, which is called Migrash, and how to calculate the fraction of the Tchum Shabbos, meaning what proportion of the Tchum is that Migrash. The Tkufas, which of the solar year, which are the 4 seasons, and there's going to be precise calculations regarding how many days there is between each one. And another term and concept is that what's called Migrash, which is an open area of 1,000 amas that surrounded the cities of the Levium. So we begin the current Daf. 11 lines down. So like we said, if you have a circular city, the Brisa said, the Mishnah said, you square it off. So says the Brisa, Bala Rabbah, so if you're coming to square off the city, how do you make the square? Where's the square? You could do diagonal, so says the Gemara, so the Brisa, Merabah Berbu Eilam. You square it off according to the square of the world, as the Gemara is going to explain what it is. You make the north going to the north of the world, and the south goes to the south of the world. In other words, we don't do as a diagonal, we don't do a diamond shape. Rather, you can now go ahead and square it around in that direction. Now, just to point out, as we said, when you're measuring the tchum of a circular city, so you first square it off. Is this showing up? Is it highlighted? No, it's not. It's not with the pencil. Oh, the tip came off. That's cool. It's not working. So it probably came out so it fell. So there's the circle city. So I'm just going to point over here, but you'll get it. I'm not going to point over here. So it's a circle city that you squared off, and you have to square around it. Then we measure 2,000 amas from the sides of the square. Now, what the Mishnah is saying now is, so how do you square it off? It's Bebu Shalaylam. You're going to do north is going to be north, south is going to be south, and that's how you square it, because it's round. Now you can make the square anywhere, and obviously it's a big difference because who's in the tchum, who's not, who's in the city, who's not, depends which way you make in the box. Obviously, if you make this in diagonal, then other people are going to be in the city, other people are going to be out of it. So that's the thing, you do it l'rebu shalaylam. Now, says the Gemara, and what's the sign if you don't know what's due north and what's due south? So the Gemara gives two different signs to figure out what's north and south. Egla betzafin. People are into mazalis, people are into their horoscope to know what. So egla betzafin, the calf, which is called Taurus, is in the north. The akr badarm, and the scorpion is in the south. So you can't necessarily see it over here, but allegedly, when you look at these constellations, you'll see the shape of a calf, and that's due north, and you'll see that look like a scorpion due south. That's, if you look up and you know what you're seeing, you see Milky Way, you see different things, you'll know what's north and what's south, and that's important because we're coming. The Chacham coming to what's the city? Where's the city limits? You're coming around Yerushalayim. That's how you'll know. B'yisem, he says, let's say maybe you daily Rabbi Yerushalayim, as Rashi says, let's say the guy doesn't know how to figure out these mazalis. So then Mirabba Kibinat Kufa. Then what you could do is that you could go ahead and do it a different way. You could go according to the seasons, meaning according to the cycle of the sun. It's recognizable what's south and what's north. Ketzat says the Brisa, says the Bisi Haso. Chama Yetzu B'Yemar. On that side, where the sun goes out on a long day, where you see it's coming out from, on let's say what's called the summer solstice, which is the longest day of the year. It comes out on one side, the Shekas B'Yemar, and then it sets on that long day on that same side. Just on the other side, when I'm saying same side, that's obviously what I'm referring to is north. It's the same side. It's coming out on one side, going on the other side, but it's on the same side. So that is Zehu Pnei Tzafon. That's the northern front. Because, as Rashi explains, and there's a lot of Rashis in great detail, the sun always goes in the daytime from east towards the south. As the pasuk says in Kalas, Haylech al Dar. It goes towards the south. Now this picture is not showing this. Our video, our Berchas Achama video from Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg goes through it very well. It's on Torah 8, it's on Daf Yomi, many different platforms. It goes towards the south. Now, the quote-unquote Haylech, the Hiluch of the Chama, is during the daytime. At nighttime, we don't call that Hiluch. Why is it not called Hiluch? As we're going to shortly quote a pasuk, it's called Seivit, because you don't see it. It's behind you. It goes around behind the globe. So that's called Seivit. Now, on the long days of the year, the summer days, so then it starts off on the northeastern corner. So it's over here, all the way on the northeast, because it always starts in the east, and it goes from the east toward the south. So it always goes a little bit this way. That's how the sun always goes. Again, we know we go around the sun, but again, just how it appears. We run based on the appearance. So it goes a little bit to the south, and then it goes to the west. Then it sets in the northwest on the long days. Now, at nighttime, actually what happens is, since it goes around in this circle, it actually goes all over here. The sun is actually not even here. The sun, since we're all the way here, it always goes south and north. So that's how the angle, elliptical is. So it's going here, but it's going to, at nighttime, in the summer months, it's going to go above the globe. So that's the northern front. Now, the next day, it's going to get a little bit less. It's not going to start from the corner. It's going to start a little bit towards the east. And then at nighttime, it's going to again settle in the west. Again, a little bit away from the corner. And at nighttime, it's going to go around again a little bit, is going to be off of the north, meaning a little bit will be in the east of the globe. A little bit more than the previous night. And so for every single day, until it comes to the next kufa, that of Kufa's Tishrei, which is the autumnal equinox, which is when it's a perfect day of 6 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Then it's going to start in the middle over here of the world, and it's going to set in the middle of night. So therefore, the night and day are going to be the same, because it's exactly the same amount of hours in the day as it is at nighttime. Now, still, every single day, it's being pulled a little bit more towards the south. That's how the cycle of the sun goes throughout the solar year. And at nighttime, it settles a little bit more towards the south, until you get to the next kufa, what's called Kufas Tevis, which is the winter solstice, which is the shortest day. Then it starts over here. Then it starts on the southeast, and it only goes on the southern side, and it sets in the southwest. And that's what the Gemara is saying, that Chama Yotze B'Yom Katzer, the sun goes on a short day, V'shekas B'Yom Katzer, and it sets in a short day, Zeu Pnei Darm. That's the southern side of the world. That is the longest day and the shortest day. And the Bryce explains, Tkufas Nisan, the spring equinox, which is an equal day of 6 and 6, with Tkufas Tishrei, and the autumnal equinox, which again an equal day, but the different halves of the year, is Chama Yotze B'Chatzi Mizrach. The sun goes out in halfway through it's halfway in the east, meaning over here, it's halfway in the east, like we said. And it sets halfway in the west. It says the pasuk in Careless to explain everything we just said up until now. It always goes to the south. The side melts off, and it always goes around. When it's behind the globe, it's always more north. Again, it's elliptical, meaning to say it's not a perfect circle around. It's always that angle. It's always going around at nighttime higher and north than it is during the daytime, as the Gemara explains. When's it going towards the south? That's by Yemen during the daytime. But when's it going around towards the northern part? That's by Laila at nighttime. As the passage continues, around, it goes in the directions. That's the eastern side and the western side. What do you mean? Sometimes it goes during the daytime, in the long days, meaning in the east and the west, it's going to be there only on the daytime. It's going to be, sometimes have mahalach, sometimes it's going to be hilach, sometimes it's going to be southern. That's the eastern and the west. Meaning it's going to be here when it's in the longest days, it's only going to be the east and the west of the world, only during the daytime. Because at nighttime, it's actually all going to be only in the north. It's not going to have the east and the west of the planet. Now sometimes the east and west, it will go around it at nighttime when it's by the winter solstice. Over here, so actually most of the east and west will be at nighttime, because when it's going around here, it's on the east and the west. meaning east or west of the world. When we say it's north, it's meaning when it's not even, doesn't have any of the planet, it's further up. And in the longest days, it doesn't even go around the planet. It's higher than the planet, if you would say it in that way. So that's the Bryson. And that's how a person can figure out what's due north and what's due south. So again, we have two ways, either from the Mazalis or from the sun. You can figure out how the sun goes, what's the longest day and the shortest day. You know the longest day, that's the north, and the shortest day you see, that's the south. Now, Amr B'Sharshi, he slightly disagrees in the Bryce. He says, less Nulahani Klali. Says, he doesn't hold up the general rules that the Bryce has said, that the sun, when it goes out in the longest day, the time like when the Bryce, he says, Lo Yatzach. No, it's not true, not like we said before. The sun never goes out Mikar Mizrachas Tzafainis, never goes out in the northeastern corner for Shaka Mikar Mizrachas Tzafainis, and then it sets in the northwestern corner. And so too the other way around. The sun never comes out from the southeastern corner, and then it sets in the southwestern corner. In other words, it's never exactly in the corner. The Brisa said it's mamish the corners. And this Brisa Rabbi Shloimy quotes is no, even the longest day and the longest night is not all the way in the corner of the world. It's a little bit less off, and therefore he slightly disagrees with that first Brisa. Now Gemara continues on this theme. Amar Shmuel. He says, here it gets a little bit more complex, a little more complicated. He says, Ein tekufas Nisan nefelas. The spring equinox does not occur elo ba'arba ribe hayom, only by 4 quarters of the day. Meaning, oy betchilas hayom, either in the beginning of the day, oy, which is, as you see in the pictures, as you can see for yourself, 12 a.m. or 12 a.m., oy betchilas halaylo, beginning of the nighttime, oy bechatzi hayom, or midday, oy bechatzi halaylo, or midnight. Now, why is this? The Rashi tells us. We know from Birchas Achamon, most people know this when you went through in Birchas Achamon for 28 years, the Ma'ayros, the luminaries, the galaxy, the stars, all the planets, Hashem put up, there were 6 days of creation. The 4th day started at nighttime of Tuesday. That's called Nigi Arba. You know the very well big brachas Daf Yomi. When Tuesday ends, in the Jewish calendar, the next day starts at nighttime. So right when the day started, Tuesday night at 6 p.m., in Chodesh Nisan, because regarding that, everyone agrees that the world was created in Nisan, although there's a machlekes that was created in Tishrei and Nisan. Regarding this, we hold as Nisan. So Chodesh Nisan, on the 4th day of creation, right when the night started, was when the luminaries were put up into the sky. Now, a solar calendar is 365 days and 6 hours. Now, if you count them in weeks, with out of 7s, is where basic mathematics come up, you'll get 7 times 7 to 7, you'll get an equal number, but you'll have an extra day and a quarter that won't go into that of a week. So based on this, it comes out that the spring equinox of the next year will be on midnight on Thursday, because you're moving ahead. If you go through the whole solar year, if you're going by weeks, same day, you're going to get an extra day and a quarter. So you just move from 6 p.m. on Tuesday night, you move that again to 6 p.m. Wednesday night, and then you can have midnight of Thursday. Yeah? And the 3rd year, you'll be 6 a.m. on Friday. And the 4th year, you'll be midday on Shabbos, and so to and so on. Every year, you're going to go another day and a quarter from this tkufa this year to the same tkufa, this 4th tkufa this year, to the same tkufa in the next year. It's always going to be a quarter of a difference, because it's a day and a quarter. So it's always going to be either 6 p.m., midnight, 6 a.m., or midday. Right? Because it's always going to be a day and a quarter. So it's going by quarters. It's going by quarters. So throughout the world history, it's always going by quarters. That's Tkufas Nisan. Main Tkufas Tammuz, my fellas. The summer solstice, which is the longest day, is never going to be, which is the next Tkufa after that. After this 4th Tkufas, the spring equinox, then goes which is equal days, which is 6 to 6. And then there's the summer solstice, which is the longest day. It's getting warmer. We're going from the spring to the summer now. That Tkufa, it comes out only so either an hour and a half into the day, which is 1:30 a.m., or 7:30, being by yom, whether it's by daytime, or being by layla, again, whether it's a.m. or p.m. As Rashi explains here too. Says, let's talk about when the spring equinox that of Tekufas Nisan, is in the beginning of the day. Beginning of the daytime, which is 6 a.m. The summer solstice, that of Tekufas Tammuz, is then going to be 7.5 hours into the day. Where Tekufas Nisan is going to be, let's say we said midday, that of Tammuz is going to be 1.5 hours into the night. Why? So Rashi explains. Because there's 7.5 hours between every tekufa, between every season. Why? Because the day that this one comes out of the previous tekufa, the same one is going to be the same day. It's just going to be that 7.5 hours further ahead. Why? Because there's 30 hours for the 4 tekufas, which is a day in a quarter. Like we said, if you go from this year to the next year, you're going an hour and a quarter more. So that's 30 hours. So if you split up 30 hours into what? A day and a quarter. If you take a day and a quarter, that's 24 hours plus 6, that's 30 hours. If you take the 30 hours, you split up into 4, that is 7.5 per each. So based on this calculation, it goes further. The Tekufas Tishrei, fellas, you're not going to have the Autumnal Equinox, which is the next season, which is going into the fall, either 3 hours into the day, or 9 hours into the day, whether it's by daytime or at nighttime. In other words, let's say the summer solstice is 1.5 hours into the day. Let's say it's 1:30 a.m. So Tishrei is going to be 7.5 hours later, the 9th hour. Let's say Tammuz, here you don't see the whole thing, because I'm on a different setting. No, it's not registered. So if Tammuz is, let's say, 7.5 hours into the day, then Tishrei is going to be the 3rd hour, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the the next one, the winter solstice, is going to be the 4.5 hours into the day, or 10.5 hours a day, whether it's daytime or nighttime, meaning whether it's AM or PM. So, for example, Rashi goes through, he says he'll show you all 4 in 1 year. He says, imagine the Tekufas Nisan, the first one that we start off with, is the 1st hour of the day, meaning it's 6 a.m. Tammuz is going to be 7.5 hours later, it's 7.5 hours into the day. Tishrei is going to be 7.5 hours later, in the 3rd hour. And then Tevis is going to be 10.5, and then the 2nd year. Nisan is going to be then by midday, which is 6 hours into the day. And then Tammuz is going to be 1.5, Tishrei is going to be 9, Tevis is going to be 4.5, and so on and so forth. That's how you get to that extra day and the quarter, which is from the 7.5 hours that you have between every tekuf. Now, says the Gemara, the reason for this is because the ein bein tekufa letekufa. Between every season, you have a letishim ve'echad yom, because if you take 365 and this quarter that we said, and that is the solar year, if you split that into quarters, because there's 4 seasons, you're going to get tishim ve'echad, 91 days, v'sheva shoyes emechza, and 7.5 hours, like we explained. So 91 days are all able to be split into weeks. Then there's an extra 7.5 hours, which is after that. So therefore, that's how the seasons go. Every season is 91. This what we're saying right now is just going to crystallize. This was all basically metrics that come out of the concept we're saying right now. Every season is 91 days and 7.5 hours after the previous one, which is a quarter of 365 and a quarter, which is how much a solar year. If it's 91 days and 7.5 hours after the previous season, 91 days is exactly weeks. So that's going to be exactly the same day. What it's going to be a little longer is 7.5 hours. So that's why we showed you the calculations that every season is going to be exactly that, because that's how the years go, because the spring equinox is always the same, those 4 quadrants, because that's how, and therefore every season is going to be either one of those 4 times is going to be, and they follow that cycle again and again and again, because again, each one is 7.5 hours after the previous season. Now, one more idea, says the Gemara, unrelated, but it is related. This is different than what we were saying about Tana. This is regarding actually the planets. A tkufa does not follow after the previous, meaning the season from the previous season will only be regarding the planets elichatzi shah. only a half-hour difference. Rashi explains what we're talking about, but it's not what you think it is necessarily talking about. The way it works, and this is more of a supernatural thing than a physical thing. There are 7 planets that we consider in regards to what we call mazalos, which is called kalash tzmacham. And that's the order of how it goes. So Rashi gives an example. He says, the first night of the week, Matzah Shabbos, right when the week starts, the first planet that, so to speak, every planet serves 1 hour as the primary planet of that mazel that's happening in the world at that time. The first one is Chaf. There's Chaf, Lamed, Shin, Tzadi, Mem, Ches, Nun. Each one of those letters represents a planet. Chaf is Mercury, is Keichav. After that comes Lamed, which is Levana. Then comes Shabsai, which is Saturn. Then comes Tzadi, which is Tzedek, which is Jupiter. Then comes Mem, which is Madam, which is Mars. Then comes Ches, which is Cham, which is the Sun. Then comes Nun, which is Noga, which is Venus. Those are 7 hours that continuously continue throughout the running the way Hashem made the world, the supernatural running of the world. So it comes out that the first hour of the day of the week, not the night, the day, first serves Ches, which is Chama, the sun. Then comes Noga, then comes Venus, and then you continue the whole sin of Kalash Tamachim. So it comes out that the first hours of the first hours of every day is going to be Chalam Katznash of the days, and every night it's going to have a different one starting, which we have in many different Gemaras, this idea that the beginning of the day is a different one. It's Katznash Chalam. It's just because every day a different one is going to be starting of the week. The first hour of the day is going to be a different planet. At 6 a.m. it's going to be a different planet. And Rashi brings that from Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, the doctor. He explains in his Sefer Tachagmuni why would it be like this. Again, it's more of a supernatural thing. It's not necessarily that the planets are actually moving in that way and that they're starting and they're coming. It's more of a supernatural thing. Now, but, says Rashi, explaining what the Gemara is saying over here, since we said that every tkufa, every season is going to be pushed ahead further, on 91 days and 7.5 hours, so 91 days exact. So it's going to be 7.5 hours further. So if, let's say, Tkufas Nisan is in the beginning of Kaichav, which is Mercury, so the next season of Tammuz is going to be halfway through Kaichav. If Tishrei is in the beginning of Levana, so then Tkufas Teva is going to be halfway through Levana. And so to all of them, because if it's 7.5 hours after the previous season, so it's still going to be in that season, it's just going to be halfway through, because every planet it rules for an hour. So therefore the next season is going to be a half hour halfway through that Tkuf. Again, it almost seems unrelated, but it's just related to this idea of the Tkuf is that regarding Mazalis, it's going to be halfway through that previous Tkuf. Another teaching, Bama Shmuel, he says, you don't have ever that if there's going to be a spring equinox, if that Tkuf starts in Jupiter, which we said that Tkuf is starting at a certain time, and if it's at when Jupiter is the constellation that's ruling the world, you're not going to have a year that's not going to destroy the trees. Meaning it's going to be a harmful thing that's ominous sign that's going to destroy trees. And you don't have a winter solstice, which is the shortest day. If it starts in Jupiter, that's not going to dry up all the plantations. And says the Gemara, but however, it's only if the Moilid, the birth of the Levana, which that's a whole different subject, we're not getting into that the Moilid of Nisan or Tevis, which is what we're speaking right now, has to be Oibel Levana Oibel Tzedek. So the Moilid, it's not just the Tekufa at a certain mazel. When this Tekufa of either Nisan or Tevis is starting at that mazel of Tzedek, it's going to be harmful if also the Moilid of the Levana was also either from the constellation of Levana or at the time when Tzedek was ruling. Then when all those things line up, then it's going to be harmful, it's going to destroy the trees, or it's going to dry up the seas. Continue with base. Says the Gemara. Now we're coming to explain the two leniencies that are inherent in the halacha of Mishnah regarding squaring the city and squaring the tchum. Says the Gemara, this is also a little bit complicated. If someone squares off a round city, like we said if it's circle, we don't keep the city circle, we make it square. So what you do is you make it like a square tablet. Later on the Gemara is going to explain. We're talking about a city that's 2,000 by 2,000 and now in a circle. So it's not 2,000 square, 2,000 in the length and 2,000 in the width. Now, when you're coming to add on a square around the city, so it's like a square tablet where the length is like the width. Now, the tchum is also going to be like a square tablet where the length is like the width, which the width is like the width of the city on the surface of the city, 2,000. And the length is also, we know the length of a tchum is also 2,000 amos. So if you think about it, what's interesting is, it's not necessarily have to be like that, but, okay, I'm pointing, but you see on top of the city, that tablet is 2,000 amos, not because the city's 2,000, because the tchum is always 2,000. It just happens to be, it's not just happens, we'll see, whatever, but that tablet is going to be exactly the size of the tablet of the city itself. It doesn't have to be. The tchum is always 2,000 amos, but the city happens to be that width. So the tablet on top is also going to be 2,000 by 2,000. Now, so that's what the Gemara is saying, that then you go and you square the tchum. In other words, you go and you measure out the tchum, and obviously it's going to be squared too. And you make it like a square tablet. And we're going to explain this brisa a little bit more. Now, continues the brisa, when he's measuring the tchum of the city, after he squared it off, this is a very important halacha, he shouldn't measure from the middle of the corner, meaning the middle of the corner, diagonal of the corner, as you see over here, this is the city. So we squared up the city. You shouldn't measure from here 2,000 amos on a diagonal, alpine amount of 2,000 amos from every corner, to measure then the thread to go from corner to corner. Like if you did this, you measured 2,000 amos this way, so then you would make a line over here, that would be the tchum. So saying, don't do that. Why not? Neshu mafsid, this is obvious. If you do that, you would be losing the corners of every corner. Meaning, you would lose what the diagonal of a 2,000 square tablet gives you. When you're going to be measuring out this imaginary thread, this line, you're only going to have the length of the tchumen from the city proper, and in every direction, meaning from here. If you did 2,000 amos this way on the diagonal when you're measuring the city, and you got to be careful because you got to know what's the corner, then in every direction of the city, in the regular directions proper, you would only have 1,428 amos. How so? This is a little bit complicated, but this is what Rashi goes to. He says, if you give a tchum of 1,428 amos in every direction from the city, then you would have to make a tablet of 1,428 for every corner to fill up the holes of the square, because the tchum also has to be square, right? You can't just have a tchum missing the corners. You have to have something here too, right? What are you filling up the corners? You would have to make, because we said for all halachas of Shabbos, you have to have payas, you have to have corners. So it comes out that the diagonal of the square that's opposite the diagonal of the corner of the city, that would then be 2,000. Meaning, if you're making this 1428, 1428, 1428, then this diagonal actually of 1428, if you made a square of 1428, would be 2,000. Why? Why would that be 2,000? Because the halacha is, kol amtza, any amma that's birdibua, and that's squared, when you go on the diagonal, it's amtza v'trei chumshi. The diagonal gives you 1.4. You get 2/5 more when you're going in a diagonal. Oh, so therefore, a tablet of 1,428 squared, that will give you, again, it's 1428 times 2 of 1/5. Those are the words Rashi uses, essentially. You're going to get 2,856 times a fifth. Which is, if you add on all those fifths, again, it's really 2/5, but if you separate it times 2 and a fifth, if you're talking about in fifths, it's going to give you, if you add up all those fifths to amos, you're going to get 572 amos minus 4/5. If you add that to the 1,428, that gives you, essentially, almost 2,000 amos. So it comes out that when you measure from the middle of the corner of the city diagonally 2,000 amos, you just shorten the tchum. You only have now, when you're walking straight, 1,428 amos. Now, why is that? Because you're losing the corners. So Ella rather says the Brisa, what you have to do is like this. If you want to figure this out, maybe tabla mervas. Bring a square tablet, she alpayim amal, which is 2,000 amas squared. Umanichlo b'keren balachseina. Put it in the corner on the diagonal, as Rashi explains. What you have to do is you have to measure 2,000 amas with its diagonal from the beginning of the city that it should be 2,800 amas. And then you measure the thread afterwards from corner to corner, and then you'll have in every direction of the city 2,000 amas, meaning going north and west. You'll have 2,000 amas in every direction. As Rashi explains, how so? If you imagine like this, it's a tic-tac-toe, this graph. So if you give 2,000 amas of a square on every 4 directions, so here, 2,000 amas squared, 2,000 amas squared, fine, you did that. Now the thing is, there's what's called pegimas, but you have what you're missing in the corners. So you have to have 2,000 square tablets there also for every corner. Now, you still have to measure a thread like a L-shaped bracket to fill up the corners for the tchum of the city. So it comes out that for every corner you're making a 2,000 amma square tablet directly the diagonal of the corner of the city. Now, what's that diagonal? That's 2,800 ammas. Why? Rashi gives the cheshbon. He says because if you take 2,000 ammas plus trei chumshi, right? If you recall, we said when you're going diagonal, it's not just 2,000 ammas. Here's 2,000, here's 2,000. When you're going diagonal, the measurement is longer. So you're going to get another 2/5. If you take 2,000 times 2/5, that gives you 4,000 fifths. If you take 4,000 fifths, that comes out to 800 ammas. So therefore, someone who's measuring the tchum of the city, he brings a tablet. He sees as if there's a tablet of 2,000 ammas squared, and he places it opposite the city on the diagonal. And then that diagonal of that tablet goes opposite the corner of the city. In other words, you're going to measure 2,800 ammas opposite the corner on the diagonal, and then you're going to measure this imaginary line from one corner to corner. So you're going to have this imaginary line going from here to over here. That's how you do the tchum of the city. Says the Brisa Nimtzis, it comes out, and this is what we're talking about over here. The city gains by that we remember the city was circular, so it was 2,000 by 2,000 circular, but we added on square. So the city gains by the fact that we squared it. You get 400 amas in every corner. Why? Because when it was circle, it didn't have a diagonal. Now that we squared off, it has a diagonal, and when you're going out of the corner, you're gaining 400 amas for every single corner, as we're going to explain, because the reason why it's 400 amas is because when you square something, it's a quarter more. Miligab, it's milivar, meaning it's really a fifth. Out of 2,000 amas, 400 is a quarter. If you take quarters, and 400, that's going to be, you add on another one, that's going to be then a fifth. It's called a fifth, but it's a fourth. But you get another 400 for the corners by squaring off the city. Then, it comes that you gain now with the tchumen also of the corners. The fact that we made a tablet and a diagonal opposite the corners, you get 800 amas in every single corner. Like we said, this is because the fact that you're doing diagonal gives you 2,800. So you're gaining, if you're going this way, you have to go to that kiddush over there. You're not just going 2,000 amas from here. You get another 400 because you squared off the city. And the fact that you're squaring off the tchum, you're not going in a circle, a tchum around. You're squaring it off. You get a diagonal, not just 2,000 amas, you get another 800. So you get bonus. 400, 800. You just says the Gemara Nimtzu comes out, the Ir v'tchum mistakin elf v'masayim lakan, comes out that the city with the tchum gained 1,200 amas over here, v'elf v'masayim lakan. You gain 1,200 over here, which is a total of 3,200 amas that you're getting more than what you would have gotten if you would just measure the tchum as it is. That's this part of the Gemara. Now, Amabaya, he says the Mishkachas law, as we explained a little bit till now, you find this as we described it, but mustn't have a tre alpha. It's specifically if you have a circular city, that was 2,000 by 2,000. That's like we mentioned that, because then that's obviously everything's based on those calculations of the tablets, because it has to be not just the tchum going this way, but this way too. That's based on the dimensions of the city. So if the city is 2,000 by 2,000 circular, that's the halacha of squaring the city and squaring the tchum. That's how you're going to get to these calculations.
Why does it have to be
Because if it's not 2,000, then let's say it's 1,000. We're actually going to come to some of these ideas very shortly. If it was 1,000 by 1,000, you wouldn't get the same dimensions, because then you're not getting, it's not a 2,000 by 2,000 tablet this anymore. It's not going to be 2,800 amas. Because if this is smaller, they're all smaller, because not just tchum. Tchum is only one dimension. Then there's this way. Tchum is going outwards. Then this way, they're all smaller, because it's all based on the inner thing. The inner square is what we're squaring around. But if that's smaller, everything's smaller. Whatever. So that's what it's based on. The Arma first, why it has to be this. But that's how Abai explains the case of when the city is 2,000 by 2,000. Says he Untitled in the Brisa, which is a related halacha, but we're getting into more cheshbonos. Amr Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi says Tchum Ar Levim, says the boundaries of the Levite cities, which the Levim got certain cities that they didn't really own land, but Hashem gave them certain cities. So they had cities, and they have Tchum around it that's also part of their properties. Are Alpayim Amma, are 2,000 amas. Now, same man, but you take out from around the cities, Elef Amma Migrish. The first 1,000 amas is what's called Migrish. What's Migrish? You're not allowed to plant, no trees, no plantations. You have to leave it for the beauty of the city. You have to leave it like a nice development. You got to leave 1,000 amas. You got to leave that area around the city of 1,000 amas. Says the Bryce, and this is going to be a point of contention. It's going to be questioned. Nimtza comes out that Migrish Revia, that the Migrish, this area over here, the Migrish, is a quarter. What's a quarter of? Now, Fashar, the rest of the Tchum, is Sadis Ukram. That could be fields and vineyards, and beyond the Tchum, they don't have anything. So those are the three areas. This is the city, this is the Migrish, and this is the Tchum. This has to be left empty. This is their city where they live, and this you can make fields and vineyards. Says the Gemara, not really. Where do we know this from? That the Migrash is 1,000 amas around the city. So Rabbi says, because the Amakra, there's a pasuk. The pasuk says in the Midbar. At the beginning of the pasuk says the Migrash are Mashatitnu, and these are the Migrash of the cities that they give. Mikira ir v'chutza. So the Migrash has to be from the wall of the city going outward. Elf amasav 1,000 amas all around, which Amar Torah, the Torah is telling you. Saveh v'seir be'elef. You surround the city with 1,000 amas. Fine. Here's where the fun starts. Says the Gemara, Nimtza Migrish Revia? The Migrish is a quarter? Revia? Palgahala. It's half. I mean, anyone knows basic math knows that if you have 2,000, all around, so then you're going to have 1,000 is half of 2,000. So how can you say it's a quarter?
You have 2,000 Alpine Amma, that's Tchum. Then you have 1,000 Amas in Mikdash, and then you have another 1,000 for Sudas Akrumim. That's total of 4,000. So
no, the Sudas Akrumim is in the. No, this is where the Sudas Akrumim are. Sudas Akrumim are in this part of the Tchum. This part they can't plant anything. This part they can plant Sudas Akrumim. So it's half. It's not a quarter. So we can have 4 answers, taking us to a quarter of the next daf to answer this question. Definitely a question, right? It's half, not a quarter. So Amar Rava, it says Barada, which is the name of the person, Meshacha, the surveyor, meaning he's the one who would measure the tchumen of the city. Asbahitli, he explained to me as follows. He says, Meshkachas Lo, you have this in the following case. The Masa David Trialfa Trialfa. It's a city, when you can have the Migrish a quarter, a city that's 2,000 amas square. Okay. Tchum ha'ama kamahav. How much is the tchum? Is shitzer. The tchum is 16 million square amas. Why? So Rashi explains. Because you have 16 squares of 1,000 by 1,000. How so? It says, take like this. The city, like we said, is 2,000 by 2,000. That means in every direction, you're getting a tablet. Think of it in that way, as we said before. You're getting a tablet, a square of 2,000 and 2,000 every direction, which is 4,000 amas. 2,000 by 2,000 is 4,000. So on every side, you have a tablet of 4,000 square amas. Now, if you go and you split up into what's called Shesi Ba'erit, you split up into squares of 1,000 amma, you get 4 squares of 1,000 by 1,000. Now, you do this for every side of this of the city. That's 4,000 times 4. That gives you 16. That gives you 16,000 thousands. So that's 16 million square amas. Kronis come out. That's only for the immediate north, east, south, west. Now, then, if you remember, what's with the Tchumen? The Tchumen also have corners. So Kamahavin, how much are the corners? That's also Shitzri. That's also 16, because every single Karen, if you recall, as we had this previous picture, we showed that every single corner also gets a tablet of 2,000 by 2,000. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that gives you also now Shitzer. You also get 16,000. So we're at 32 million square amas. So now, says the Gemara, Dao, take away for the purposes of Migrash, which is, how much are you going to take away? Because the Migrash is right around the city. You're going to take sometimes the pictures are confusing because it could be based on what we're telling you for the Maskana, but just imagine around it, like over here, the Migrash, take off Tamanya de Tchumen, take off half of the Tchum. So let's say over here, you have all these tablets. Imagine a line taking off half of the Tchumen. Take off half. V'arba de Kronis. Now, this is where it's also interesting. The Kronis, you're not going to take off a half. You're going to take off a quarter. Because you said that what you do is you take 1,000 around the city. So, by the Tchumen, you have 2,000 along the length of the city, and the width, you can have only 1,000. So since you're giving 1,000 that's sticking out of the migrash, that's 1,000 times 2, because you're getting 2 in the what's called horizontal line. Here you're getting 2, and here you're getting 1, because you're only getting half of that. So if you do that times the 4 directions, that gives you 8. Right? 2 times 4 is 8. You have 2 times 1,000 is 2, times 4 sides is 8. And then you have to give for every corner. What do you give in every corner? If you think about it, you're getting 1,000 by 1,000. Because in the corner, you're getting only this. Right? You with me? Because you're going around like this. Here you're getting half, but here you're getting only a quarter. So that comes out, you're getting 4 from the corners. Sakama hava. So how much do you have of the migrash? 8 plus 4 is traces 12. All 1,000 squares. So it's 12,000. 12 million. Yeah, square. Yeah, total. Says the Gemara, then it's a migrash ravia. So what are you saying? Comes out, you're telling me migrash is a quarter? How can it be a quarter? It's more than a third. We just calculated that you get 12 million amis for the migrash. And how big is the tchum? Is 32 million, because we said that you get 8 times 4. What?
28.
What?
Tchum is 28.
The tchum
32
is...
including the city.
The tchum is... no, the tchum is 32, because we said that is the corners. We said it's 16 plus 16 is 32. We said this is 16 because there are 4, 2 times 2. It's 4 times 4 is 16, and then you have 4 over here, the corners, which is also 16. It's 32. So you get 12 out of 32 million. And that's why I used to teach math. I used to tell my students that you can learn these sugis in Eruvin, right? No calculators helping you over here. Right? It's 12 out of 32 is not a quarter. Right? 12, 12, 12. That's more than a third. That's 12 out of 36. Here it's 12 out of 32. So how are you saying it's a quarter? Says the Gemara, I see our bod demas. Let's bring the 4,000 of the city, because that's also 2,000 square. So bring that and shadi alai and put it onto the 32 million square amas. That's going to make a total of 36. What we're saying, Midrash Zervia was going on everything, the whole calculation of the city with the tchum and the corners. So the obvious question is, you're going to say, okay, that's 12 out of 36. You're still not doing math. Akati tilzava, it's still a third. So it's not more than a third, but it's a third. 12 out of 36 is 36 divided by 3 is 12. That's how you're calling it a quarter. Says the Gemara, Misava, did you think to say that Bribu Kamar, did you think we're talking about a square city? No. That's what our picture is showing. Bigula Kamar. We're talking about a round city. Kam Rubi Yasaliga, how much is a square city more than a round city? It's Revia, it's a quarter. So since we were calculating up until with a quarter more, now we're talking about a circular city, Dal Revia Menayu. Take away a quarter of the numbers. Hashalu Tish, if you take away from the 12 that we were counting up until the Midrash, it says 12 out of 36, take away a quarter from that gives you down to now 9. The Tisha Mitlas and Bashita, and 9 out of 36 is Rivahava, is a quarter. So like Rashi explains, you were calculating up until now with a square city, and therefore when you made the Midrash all around, you also did it with squared, so therefore you had the calculation of the city with its Midrash to be, if you're calculating the city with the Midrash, you got a square of 4 by 4,000 squared, which are 16 squares of 1,000 by 1,000, and then 3 portions of them go to the Midrash, which, like we said, that was 12 out of the 16, and the 1 quarter of it was for the city, right? Meaning the city itself is only 2,000 by 2,000. If you look at the Midrash is getting 2,000 each direction. So the Midrash is going to be 3 quarters, and the city is going to only be 1 quarter. If you calculate this whole area together, the city is going to be only, even though there's not from the shape of how it is over here, but the city is 2,000 by 2,000. The Midrash is this is 1,000 by 2,000 here. You get 2,000 there, 2,000 there, 2,000 here. So the Midrash is going to be 3 quarters of the sum total of how much the ear is with the Midrash itself, which would be 12 out of the 16. But that's not the main important thing. But that's where you got the number 12 from. And that's why you were asking, hey, 12 out of 36, it's a third, not a quarter. No, you're mistaken. We're talking about a circular city. And still, Rashi explains, when we add on to give to the Levium, we square it off. We give them the corners with the tchum, 2,000 every direction. So it comes out that the sum total of the portion that the Levium get is 6,000 amis squared, which is 36 of these squares of 1,000 by 1,000. Now the city is in the middle, that's around 2,000 amis, and the Midrash is around it, also around 1,000 amis. So it comes out that the city with the Midrash is 4,000 amis round, not squared. Now, if you would have 4,000 by 4,000 squared the Midrash in the city like we thought before, then it would be a total of everything together would be 16 million. Now that it's round, you take off a quarter, now it's 12. And 3 parts of that go to the Midrash, and the remaining quarter goes to the city, which that tells you that the Midrash gets 9. 9 from 36 is a quarter, and therefore that's where we got this measurement of a river. That was one interpretation. We got 3 more to go. Abayam, he says, Mishkachas la nami, but must have alpha balfa. He says, no, it doesn't have to be like you just described it of a city that's 2,000 squared. It could even be 1,000 squared. And we're not calculating the Gemara, the previous text, had to add on to the metrics, to add on the city itself. No, we're not adding the city from it, as we would sound like. We're just handling from the tchum. Rather, the Midrash is going to be quarters going on the tchum with the corners. The Gemara asks, wait a second, how's this possible? Tchum and kamahavya, how much is the tchum going to be? It's tamanya. It's 8 cubes of 1,000 by 1,000. Why? Because the tchum in every direction is 2,000 amas in the length from the city. So answering regarding the question we had before regarding why the dimensions of the city play a role, because in the length of the tchum, it's always 2,000 amas from where you are. But in the width now, these squares are only getting 1,000 the width because it's on the surface of the city, and the city is only 1,000 by 1,000. So these blocks, if you imagine you're making these tablets, are not 2,000 by 2,000 anymore. It's 2,000 by 1,000 because it's on the surface of the city. So if that's the case, that means every tchum is 2,000, not 4,000, as we had in the previous interpretation, where it's 2 by 2, it's 2 by 1 over here. So it's going to be 2,000 times 4. So that will give you 8,000. That's how much the tchum is. And we're always splitting up the tchum with when we say tchum, we mean the exact direction of north, east, south, west. But then there's the corners. We consider the corners as separate. So corners kamahavi. How much are the corners? Are shitzer. 16. Wait a second. Why the corners 16? Because since the length of the tchum spread out in the length, 2,000 amas in every direction, you have to fill up the pagam. You have to make payos. Wait a second. That means with the tic-tac-toe, you got to be making tablets of 2,000 by 2,000. If you do 4 of those, you get 16 because 2 by 2 is 4 times 4 corners is 16 plus the 8. We're at 24. The tchum is 24 million amas. So we continue to have a Zayin and Aleph with Dal. We have to take away, for the purposes of the migrash, arba tchumim, the 4 of the tchum. Why? Because you get 1,000 in every side coming out from the city. On the surface of the city is 1,000, like the measurement of the city. So you're getting 1,000 by 1,000 of the migrash in every side. So it's really like 1 times 1, which is 1, times 4. So you have the 4 of the tchumen, v'arba the kronas, and you're only getting, like we said, 1 of the corner because you get like a quarter. You get that corner of that square, which is only 4/2. So kamahava, how much is the migrash? Is tamanya is 8. Says the Gemara. So where are you getting a quarter? Til sava, it's a third. You're getting 8 of migrash out of 24. Again, basic math. 8 times 3 is 24. So how are you saying it's a quarter? Says the Gemara, Misa, did you think we were Kamar? Oh, you thought we were talking about a square city? You were calculating with a square city, and therefore you had to say that when you're giving a migrash, you're giving it also with a square all around. So therefore you got to the number of 8,000. No, the Gula Kamar. Calculate the city as if it's circular, and then the migrash is also circular. So then you're going to get 3,000 by 3,000 of the total, because if the city is 1,000 by 1,000, if you count the migrash on either side, which is 1,000, if you calculate the migrash with the city, it's a circle of 3,000 by 3,000. Now, had you squared it off, then that would be a total of 9, because you would have 8 for the migrash, like we said before, and the 9th one would be for the city. But Be'igula Kamar, we're talking about where now that everything is round, so then you have to Kama Meruba Yes al Eagle. How much is a square more than this circle? It's a revia, it's a quarter. So Dal Revia, now that it's round, you have to take off a quarter from the dimensions of the city that you had up until now, and a quarter from the Migrash. So Pashal Shisa. So if you take off a quarter from 9, you're left with 6. Veshita from 8. And Veshita Mechov Dalid. So 6 out of 24, which is what's given to the Levium, besides the city, is Rivahava, is a quarter. So as Rashi has to answer, although the settlement of the city is round, and the migrash is round, but regarding the portion of the Levium, regarding the tchum of Shabbos, we add on a square and we give them the tchum of 1,000 amas in the width of the measurement of the city in every direction, but the length is 2,000, and the corners to fill up that pagam are going to be squares of 2,000 by 2,000. So it comes out that the sum total of the city of the Levium, including the tchum and the corners, are going to be 5,000, 5 million, let's say, squared, which is a tchum of 2,000 on one side, and a tchum of 2,000 on the other side, and the city in the middle. So that's going to be a square of 5,000 amas, which then makes that the tchum are 8, the corners are 16, if we're going with blocks of 1,000. So it comes out that the migrash is a quarter of the tchumen and the corners, because like we said, it's 8 if it was squared. Since it's circular, it's a quarter less, which is 6. 6 out of 24 is a quarter. That's the second interpretation. Third interpretation, Ravinam, he says that it's like we were saying before. We're talking about where the city is a square. 2,000 by 2,000 square, where the tchum is 16 million amas. And the corners are also 16. And the migrash is 12 from that, which is 12 out of 32. So my Revia. So how are we saying that it's a quarter? It's not a quarter. And that's the Ravina. No, Revia de Tchumen. Meaning, it comes out that the Migrash of the Tchum is a quarter of the Tchum with the corners. Because the Migrash, like we said, of the Tchum is 8, as we said before. And it's a quarter of 32, which as Tais explains, obviously, you have to understand that this Ravina holds there's no Migrash for Kranis. So you're only getting Migrash by the Tchumen. This Ravina does not hold you get by the corners. The sum total of the Migrash from the Tchum and the Kranis. How much is the sum total of the Tchum and the Kranis? We said each side is 4, 2 by 2, 2,000 by 2,000, every side. And that's 4. Times the 4 sides is 16. And the Kranis also have 4 Kranis is another 16, 32. 8 out of 32 is going to be a quarter. Why is it only 8? Because you only get Migrash by the Tchum and you don't get in the corners. So therefore it's the sum total of the Tchum and the Kranis. The final interpretation of Hashem, he says like Ravina. We're talking about a square city, not like the other answers have to give that it's circular. It's a square city, it's 2,000 by 2,000. Now, what does the Brisa mean when it says Nimtza comes out that the Migrash is going to be Revia? What it means to say is that the Migrash of the Kranis, there's 2 interpretations of Rashi over here, I'm going to go with both. The Migrash of the corners is Revia the Kranis, is a quarter of the Kranis. Meaning, it's interesting, but if you think about it, every corner by the Tchumen it's half. But we were just talking about the corners. The Migrash of the corners is a quarter. Because if you think about a corner, you always get only a quarter. That's one interpretation of Rashi. Which then the Gemara asked, Amalei Ravina Rav Ashi says, oh come on, but the pasuk, when it talks about the Migrash, talks about all around. The Tana would be talking about what the pasuk says. Why would he tell you a corner of the Kranis if Migrash goes all the way around? That's one interpretation. Another interpretation, Rashi says, no. Rav Ashi holds that you don't get Migrash. Only the Kranis get Migrash. You only get Migrash by the corners, which is the beauty of the design, that the city had to have open space only by the corners, which is 1,000 by 1,000. So therefore, whether it's a big city or a small city, the Migrash is always going to be a corner of the Kranis, because the Kranis are always 16, and the Migrash is always going to be 4, because that's, no matter how big it is, the Tchum is always coming out 2,000, but the tablet's always going to be 2,000 by 2,000, and therefore, that's why it's going to be, and that's what the Gemara's question was, what do you mean? But Migrash is not only by the corners, it says Saviv, the Migrash was all around, not just by the corners. And that says the Gemara, no, my Saviv, what does it mean that you have to have Migrash around? It means Saviv the Kramis. It means around by the corners, but not all the way around. You're right, Migrash was not all around the city. And the Gemara says, I'll prove it to you. Because the Ilay Tamar Chaybion said, like we just said, then Gabi Oila, by the blood of the Kram Noila. They throw the blood of the oila on the altar all around. You think it's all around? We know that we don't. We throw it on the corners. Elamaisa, what does it mean all around? Sav the Kranis is all around the corner. Here also, interestingly, the Migrash that the Levim had, that you read simple in the pasuk, you think it means all around. It doesn't mean all around. It means Sav the Kranis. It means around the corners, and therefore, says Rav Ashi, you're always going to get that the Migrash is a quarter of the Kranis. Because you only measure based on the Kranis, because you don't even get by the Tchum Migrash. So, based on the corners where you're making the Migrash, it's going to be a quarter of the Tchum. That's the 4 different interpretations why we said that the Migrash is going to be, of the Or Leviim, a quarter of the Tchum. Some of these we spoke about in today's Daf, in the Eruvin Daf Nun Vav, if we have enough power to make it to the end. We said that with the Rebuah is Rebuah Shalayla. We said 2 signs. How do you know what the direction of the world? We need due north towards south. It has to be exactly squared off the planet in those directions. It's either because it's based on the constellations, based on your horoscope, that Taurus is in the north and the Scorpio is in the south, and when you see that and you're looking up, you know that's north, that's south. Or you know based on the Tkufis, where Tkufis Tammuz, which is the longest day, which is the summer solstice, is the sun is starting all the way due north, meaning it's starting in the east all the way up north and setting in the west. That's north. And Tekuvas Tevet is the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year. Then it starts all the way on the east, on south, and then ends south. And that's how you'll know what south is. And Nisan Tishri, which is the equinox, which is 6 to 6, that's in the middle of the planet. We said that the Tekufas, what hours they fall out on, but essentially it all really comes down to the just basic calculation. If every Tekufa is 91 days and 7.5 hours after the previous one, because a solar calendar is 365 days and a quarter. And if you split that into quarters, because every season is exactly a quarter, that's how there's 4 seasons. Everyone learns as a little kid there's 4 seasons. That's going to make each one 91 days, and then 7 hours later. So if these kufas started at 6 p.m. Tuesday night, Sheshim Bereshis, which is the beginning of the 4th day, which is when the motors were put up, the Yom Revi. So then it's going to be that following that cycle, 91 days, 7 hours later, and so on and so forth. So therefore, like we said, for the Kufas Nisan, it's always going to be either 6 p.m., midnight, 6 a.m., or midday. And that's how it continues to, it's got to be one of those 4. So therefore we said, based on a very different halacha regarding that of the planets, regarding the mazalis, every tkufa is going to be only a half hour later of that mazal that the previous tkufa had started. Because we said there's 7 mazalis, and each one moves for an hour, and they have a continuous cycle of 7, 7, 7, 7. So therefore, the next kufa is going to be 91 days, which is exactly that same day, and 7.5 hours later. Now, 7 hours later is exactly the same mazel that it was. A half hour later, it's a half hour into that previous mazel. We said when you square up a city, you square up the city and the tchum with square tablets. And we said, very important, don't measure from the middle of the corner, because if you measure your 2,000 amas from the edge of the city on the corner, you're going to be losing out, because 2,000 that way is then going to be only 1,428 in straight directions. Rather, what you do is, like we have the picture over here, you make these virtual square tablets in the corners, 2,000 by 2,000, which then the city's going to gain, because the city itself also, although we drew a square over here, it actually was round. The city, by squaring it off, you gain 400 amas in every corner, because that's how much a square is more than a circle. And the tchum gains 800 amas in every corner, because by making these squares, instead of going 2,000 this way, if you're making 2,000 by 2,000, you're getting kol amsa biribua is trei chumshi. Every amma in the diagonal gives you another 2/5. So that's going to give you those 4,000 fifths, which is going to give you another 800 amas. So therefore, you gain a lot by doing the squaring off. We said then, related, the tchum of the Arlavim is also 2,000 amas, and the 1,000 amas around is a migrash. The Brisa says these ominous words, nimtz migrash revi, comes that the migrash is a quarter. So the Gemara asks what I mean. If half of 2,000 is 1,000. So the first answer said like this: we're talking about a round city, and it's a city that's 2,000 amas square. Now the tchum is 16,000 amas because it's actually should say 2,000 over here. It's 2,000 by 2,000. Well, really, I wrote 16 times 1,000 times 1,000 because we're going 1,000 amas cubes. But whatever, the tchum is going to be 16 because we said each side is 2,000 by 2,000. So you take them times 4 to get 16. Then you have the kronas are also 16 because you have the same tablets in the corners. That's 32. Now the migrash has 8 of the tchum because it's half of the tchum. That's 2,000 by 2,000 the tchum every corner, and this is 1,000 by 2,000. So it's half of that. So the tchum is 16. It gets 8 of that. Now it only gets 4 of the kronas. Doesn't get 8 of the kronas because by a corner, like we say, you're only getting by the corner you only get going down a bit. By the corner you're only getting this. You get 1,000 by 1,000. You're leaving over 3/4 over there. So therefore you get 4 of the kronas. That makes a total of 12 for migrash. Now although that's 12 out of 32, and even if we're going to add on 4 of the city, that makes it 12 out of 36. That's still going to be a third, not a quarter. Yes, but we're talking about a round city. Take off a quarter of the number 12 that you had, it makes it to 9. 9 out of 36 is Revi as a quarter. That was one answer. Second approach, Rabbi says, Abai says, he says, I'm in a city that's 1,000 by 1,000. Okay, it's 1,000 by 1,000, that means the tchumen is only 8. Because it's 2,000 by 1,000 now, right? That's why it gets important what size the city is. Because the width is only 1,000, so the length is 2,000 by 1,000. So that's times 4, 2 times 4, because 2 by 1 is 8,000. And the kronas are 16, because the kronas are still going to be 2 by 2, because you have to fill those tic-tacs, because you went up 2,000 in each direction, you got to fill those gaps. That's going to be still 16. So the migrash gets 4 of the tchumen, because it's half of that, so that's going to be 4. And only gets 4 of the kronas, like we said, because it gets only a quarter of that corners. So that's 8. 8 out of 24 is a third. How's it a quarter? Yes, but we're talking about a round city. Take off a quarter from that, it's 6. 6 out of 24 is... time up. Thank you for hosting.